ask me not to go so fast. Slow your roll down, baby. He said, got him a little girl. She ain't no cruiser like I am. Well, you know she ain't the one. You got to ride, boy, ride.
Hi, welcome back. Thanks for sticking with me. This is a lot of information. Who knew? Anyhow, now we're going to talk about writing your needs assessment. And so basically, at this point, theoretically, you have written an introduction. Not that I expected you to be writing along, but you will have written an introduction. And its purpose is basically to introduce you and your organization and sort of establish credibility and try to convince the funder that your mission and vision and objectives align with theirs. And so hopefully you've done that well. And then the next step is to try to sell them on whatever this project is or problem that you're trying to tackle is actually a problem. And that's what your needs assessment does. So a needs assessment is just a statement about or of or relating to a problem or opportunity. And it can be in your local community, it can be a national problem, whatever it may be. You're trying to convince the funder that this is a problem that needs to be solved and is worthy of their money in an effort to solve it. And so basically you're answering three questions. So what problem does the targeted need address? And so that's actually a little bit confusing. But so I'll use my example of childhood obesity in this one. And so we would say that, the target audience for this and the target problem is that obesity in the children ages 5 to 11 category is skyrocketing. And then the next question, why should this project be undertaken? And we say, it's skyrocketing. It leads to a number of health concerns, type 2 diabetes, like all kinds of developmental problems. I don't know if any of this is true. I don't really know anything about childhood obesity at all, but these are things that sound good. And so we kind of pitch it as this is why this should be undertaken. These are real problems that people are having. And then the third one, which is kind of important, what are the benefits of addressing this need now? Or you could also couch it as what are the dangers of not addressing this need now? And so, in our grant that we submitted to United Healthcare on childhood obesity, we said, since 1987, the rate of childhood obesity in that age group, 5 to 11, has more than tripled. And so it's just this sort of skyrocketing out of control problem that needs to be addressed. And then the next line down there, identify a compelling need that is aligned with the grant maker's vision. Then we go back to them and say, we were pitching it to United Healthcare. We said, look, you guys are obviously in the business of trying to keep people healthy. And so, that kind of aligned with their goals. And then, this last one here is really kind of the take-home message from this slide. And that is that if you don't do a good job of demonstrating that this is a need, this is a problem that needs to be solved, then the rest of your application is kind of for naught, right? Because it doesn't matter how good your program is or how credible you are or how competent you are. If you haven't sold them that this is a problem, then they're not going to give you any money to try to tackle that problem. So that's something that you got to do. Here are some strategies to help you with that. Make sure that it's clear that the problem that you're addressing is related to your mission, vision, and values, as well as to the to the funding organization. Whenever you make your case, you can't just speak in broad generalities. You need to support it with evidence, like statistics from authoritative sources. So if you're the example of if you're the Wildlife Federation, that group. I don't know why I keep going back to them. I don't really know a lot about wildlife either. But, if you're them, you might say the population of wolves has gone down dramatically from hunting since the 1970s, and they're an apex predator. And if they're wiped out, then rabbits will, overpopulate the land and eat everyone's, what little vegetation there is in the West. Anyway, I don't know what it is. But you need to cite authoritative sources on that. And so you would bring in experts and research articles, and you get census information depending on what your topic is, and so on and so forth. You can also bring in testimony from other persons or organizations that are reputable, about this situation. And so those are ways to sort of support your case. You also want to make sure that what you're proposing to solve, like the need that you're trying to meet, is reasonable in scope, meaning that it's possible for you to make a dent in it, so to speak, with the money from this grant, And so, like, if they're giving you like $1,000 and you're like, we're gonna, fix the ecosystem in the Rocky Mountains, then the granting agency is going to look at you and be like, I'm throwing my money away, because they're never going to be able to accomplish their goal. So you want to make sure that, whatever need that you're trying to address is something that, can be met substantially with the amount that you're being given or asking for. And finally, the last one here, it should be stated in terms of clients rather than the needs of your organization. What a lot of people will do, go back to our childhood, let's do outdoor education. So we'll say the problem is that children are experiencing nature deficit disorder. They don't get enough of nature. They don't understand how ecosystem works. Whatever the reason is. And we don't have enough programs for students to get out into nature and experience nature. And then what a lot of times, in fact 9 times out of 10 that I've seen, your organization would write and say the problem is that there aren't enough wildlife education programs, and that's being written in through the lens of your organization. And that's not the real problem. The real problem is that, children don't know anything about nature. The program is designed to help with that. The fact that we don't have the program is not the problem. The problem is what the children have, where they don't know how to get into nature. Hopefully that makes sense. We can talk about that in class. And always appeal to, logic and emotion and ethics. It's okay to be a little bit overwrought. It's okay to appeal to an ethical sort of thing, and it definitely okay always to build a logical argument. But it doesn't, what I'm getting at here is that you don't just need to cite a bunch of random facts and stats, and you need to be persuasive, and you can use all 3 of these things in an attempt to be persuasive. So here are some things to avoid doing in your needs assessment. The first one being identify solutions rather than problems. We can talk about solutions later. The needs assessment is to focus all on why this is a huge problem. So always focus on the problems. Identify wants rather than needs. This would be a bad thing to do. My old CEO of my foundation used to say, Adam, there's no money for good programs. There's only money for absolutely essential programs. And so there's no grant money for things that would be nice. You need to, identify this need needs to be the absolute most important thing in the world, or at least that's how you need to pitch it. So no, man, it would be nice to have this. Another bad thing to do, again, is to focus on the needs of your organization rather than the client's needs. You always need to write in terms of how, what you're going to do, how you're going to help people, not how their money will help your program. Hopefully that makes sense. You don't want to look greedy. You do want to look committed, though. A good way to look greedy is to ask for the maximum amount of money that is available. Usually, whenever they give grants, they'll say, between $5,000 and $10,000 or $10,000 and $20,000. And if you're like, I want all $20,000, but don't really have a solid budget, for it, you just look greedy. But if you start with your program and then budget by activity, and then you find that you need $17,598, then you don't look greedy. Then you look like you're doing a good job. Another thing not to do is only to use one type of evidence or data source. So if you cite one study or several studies from one particular source, your case can look sort of one-sided. So you want to make sure that you're getting different types of evidence, because people are swayed by different things, but also evidence from different sources so that it looks like a lot of people agree with you. And then lastly, be really general in your wording rather than specific. Specificity, being really detailed counts, because people generally want to give money to people that look like they know what the hell they're doing. So let me show you some examples that I pulled from the Purdue OWL of ways to like word your things to where they're better. So I wonder if I can make this bigger. Yes, rock on. So we have general, more specific, very specific. So if we were talking about students, a really general term would be like, young students will do this thing. More specific would be middle school students, but what we're looking for in terms of level of specificity would be students aged 12 to 15. They should write the numerals 12 to 15. Same thing like, oh, we're going to have our program at nighttime, whatever that is. Or after 7, which could be, any time in the 4 hours or whatever it is between then and midnight, or 5 hours. Anyway, so, better to say between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Here's a good one too. Like a lot of times people will be like, farmers are going to do this project. And in our minds, we know what farmers are going to do the project, but in the funder's mind, they're like, which farmers? And so if you can say corn farmers, or better still, corn farmers who have less than 50 square acres of farmland, that gives them a much more accurate idea of who exactly we're helping, like who's going to be helped by this. So those are good. That's not a good one. We'll come back to those when we do, whenever we do objectives. So those are good. All right, let's move on. Step 5, now we're going to write goals and objectives. So you've hopefully identified a need. You said this is a problem. The next step then is to say, what are we going to do about this problem? And so, and those come in the terms of goals and objectives. Like, how are we going to try to make a difference? So first, let's talk about the differences between goals and objectives. And if this is something that you've struggled with, don't worry. I've worked with all kinds of like extension folks, and they also struggle with this sort of thing because a lot of people use the terms interchangeably, and for the sake of most grants, like they're not interchangeable. And so a goal is a long-range and general sort of like statement. Goals are what we strive for, but not necessarily what we plan to achieve. They're sort of like best case scenario. And so this one, an example is students at Okeechobee High School will graduate knowing how to read a wide range of challenging material in all subjects. At Okeechobee High School, like I think that they're really just happy if they graduate knowing how to read, but this is our goal. An objective is something different. Like objectives are sort of like mile markers or something. Like you set them up so that you know when you reach them. How would we know if we reached our goal as it was worded there? How do we know that they're reading a wide range of, like, how do we measure that? In what time frame? Like, what are they reading? Like, we don't have enough specifics there to really help us be like, man, we've achieved our goal. Like, and so that's where objectives come in. They're more specific. They're written to be an end, like they're written to be a thing that we can achieve and say, yes, we achieved this. And so they're more focused on the who, what, where, when, and under what conditions and how measured. What a lot of people will reference is the SMART objectives, which stands for specific, measurable, meaningful, assigned, realistic, and timed. There's a reading about SMART objectives for you all on Scholar. And so, here's a corollary objective to the goal that we just read a minute ago. And so it says, by May 2015, all incoming freshman students identified as struggling readers will read at grade level as measured by the Gates-McGinty Standardized Reading Test. I can read, I promise. And so that has a lot of things, right? So by May 2015, that's our time, like that's our goal. Like this is the moment at which we're going to stop and see if we reached our objective. All incoming freshman students identified as struggling readers, that's the who, like that's our specific audience. We'll read at a grade level, all right? That's our meaningful, measurable task. And then how we're going to measure it is this Gates-McGinty Standardized Reading Test. And so, these seem like they should be easy to do, but they're actually very hard to write. So we're going to spend some time working on that. So that's an example of the two differences. Other things to consider when you're writing your goals and objectives that your funder will be looking for is that whatever you propose, like whatever you want to do, whatever your program is, hopefully will either be A, sustainable, or B, continue to have impact beyond the end of the grant. You could think of most grants as being sort of seed money. Like they want to sort of start things in motion, and so that they can then grow and take root and be self-sustaining. And so if you propose like objectives or goals that inherently just dry up and stop working whenever they run out of money, then they're probably not going to fund that. And then this last one is a little bit like it's a little axiom from philanthropy. People help people, not programs. And this goes back to sort of always writing your goals and objectives in terms of how are you going to help clients, because like the funder, and for that matter anybody that ever gives you money for your program, doesn't care about your program. I'm sorry. Like I know that you love your program and you're like, oh, my program this, my program that. Like nobody cares about your program. Your program is a tool to help people. And so, with whatever that is, if it's helping them be better farmers, if it's helping them learn more about nature, or become better educators, whatever it is, the program is a tool to help them in that, achieve that goal. It's like the program isn't the end. All right, that's enough from me. All right, so the last part, describing methods and activities. This is step number 6, the last step, just FYI. Now we've talked about, we've introduced ourselves, we've said who we are and why we're good at things. We've said, we specified a need and made a pitch for why it's a legit need that needs to be tackled. We put in our objectives and our goals, and we said this is what we want to do. This is the dent that we want to make in this problem. And then step 6 is, how we're going to do it. Describe methods and activities. And so this little, gem here came out of the book. What was the book called again? I'll grant you that. Yeah, I'll grant you that. That's terrible. Anyway, your stockbroker tells you he can make you a lot of money if you give him $10,000. And that might get your interest, but you ain't going to trust him and you ain't going to give him your money until you can explain, or until he can explain to you rather, how he's going to accomplish it and why he chose that method, like why that method is best. And that's essentially what you're doing in this methods and activities section. You're trying to lay out a strategy for how you're going to achieve the objectives that you laid out, and usually this comes in the form of like an educational program or some kind of intervention, and then why it's best. So here are some things for you to consider. A good methods and activities section should define the method. So this is the rationale for your approach, best practices. You can throw in some research on why this is particularly effective. And basically you're trying to convince the grant maker that this is the best way. This should be in a narrative form, And so I'll give you an example. If your need is, again, that children don't know anything about nature, and that, it sucks for them, then your method may be that you're going to host a sleepaway camp. Like that could be your program. Like that's your method. Sleepaway camp, like residential camping, is sort of its own methodology in terms of being an intervention in children's lives. So that's your method. The next thing is describe activities, and I laid out that method so that I could hopefully juxtapose it to what activities are, because people get these confused a lot. And so an like if your method is like a sleepaway summer camp to help people learn about nature, an activity might be like a nighttime owl prowl, where like we take flashlights and make the children be really quiet and go out and try and spot owls. That's a specific activity within the larger method. And you would want to lay out like all the list of activities that you're going to do, and you can lay them out in table form. And here are some things to include. What the activity is, which objective it's trying to meet. So every activity that you should do should hopefully tie back to achieving some objective. Because if it doesn't, then it's not meeting your objectives, and it should probably cut. Who's responsible for carrying that out? And then what's the timeline? Do we do it in the month of May? Is it like, the first week of August to the third week of September? Is it, 7 p.m. to 11 p.m.? Like, what is the timeline? Thirdly, You want to establish a management plan, and that sounds really involved, but it's not. We just want to know who will be responsible for carrying out this project, like specifically. Again, we mentioned earlier, like a lot of people were right, like the board of directors will be ultimately responsible. Well, of course they will, because your board of directors, if you're a corporation, is ultimately responsible for everything that your corporation does. What we want to know is again, like the 5 people that are going to be working on this. And why they would be really good at it. And it's okay to be a little bit redundant if you've written about this before. And then finally, present a timeline. Like, when will each major activity begin and end, And so, again, if it's like a summer camp and the summer camp goes for the month of August, then maybe, like activities like 1 through 3 will happen during the first week. 4 through 6 will happen in the second week, and you just make yourself a little calendar or table to sort of show the progression of when everything's going to be done. All right, last thing, these are just sort of general keys to success. This is the mindset part of this lesson that I told you about. Keys to success. Never ask strangers for money. And this sort of goes back to you need to do the research on the organization that you're asking or applying to, so that when you actually do submit your grant application, like they're not strangers to you. You know what their values are. You know what their mission is. Hopefully you struck up a relationship with somebody at the organization. They're no longer like a random person that you're asking for money. There is no substitute for a good idea. This is so true. Like, you can't BS it if it's a terrible idea. So good ideas are important. They're, innovative. They foster collaboration, meaning, a lot of people want to work on the project with you, and they produce measurable change, like things like tangible things, or not even tangible, but like things that we can feel and see and measure, that we can say we're doing good things. Problems need and exist in the real world, not in your organization. Again, this goes back to what the example that I mentioned about people that always want to write in terms of what their program needs, but no, like the children are obese and we need to help that, not we need to help my program put on things for the children. So always write in terms of your clients and the problems that are theirs in the real world. State clear goals and objectives that, if achieved, will help to solve the problem or needs identified. This seems to go without saying. A lot of people write objectives that don't mean anything. Like, we want to, we see our objectives and we think if we achieve those, stuff will happen that will be better. Explain, this is an important one. I mean, they're all important, but this one's particularly important. Explain your strategy for solving the problem, not a list of activities. And so in our last section, we talked about methods and activities. And you want to lay that out as though this is our strategy for solving the problem that we discussed in the needs statement. It's not just a random list of stuff we're going to do. And that's subtle, but that's something that you need to think about as you write that section. You want to demonstrate your organization's capability, just that you'll be good at it. And just always remember that, what is success? Success is change. We need to show that we're changing things, or that we can change things. Otherwise, people will never give us money. All right. Hey, that is, I have references. I just forgot to put them in there. That is the end of that one. Here is one of your readings, the SMART objectives. From the University of Florida. It'll be up there to read. And then also, I wanted to show you, let's see here, 8 key things to remember. This is your other reading. And it's just those 7 or 8 keys to success that I just went over in, sort of word form. And it's good to sort of keep these at the forefront as you're working through your proposal. This one ended up being a much more in-depth assignment than I had initially anticipated. And so we will probably change the, timeline for this to give you as much time as you need to work on it as you need to. Because I would rather you do it well than to have you rush through it and feel like you didn't learn anything. So, all right. Hey, that's it for me. Thanks for listening. I will see you all in class.
Now let me tell you, I'll buy you new appliances. I wanna take you out better.